Hi there. My name is Jennifer French, and I'm coming to you from the Yoga Sanctuary in downtown Punta Gorda, Florida. And today I'd like to talk to you about a posture that we do regularly in our yoga practice. Some of you will know it as a simple cross-legged seat. In the yoga tradition, we use the Sanskrit name. Sanskrit is the language of yoga, and this would be called Sukhasana. Now, the interesting thing about Sukhasana is that Sukha translates to sweet or comfortable or even easy, right? And so that isn't always the way it is in this pose. It's not always an easy, comfortable, or definitely not a sweet posture for many of us, right? So sitting cross-legged can bring its own challenges. It might bring challenges into your knees or your hips or even the feet and ankles. Definitely in the back, if you start to hold it for a really long time, you could feel strain in your back. So what I'd like to do today is explore different ways of taking the pose that bring a little bit of the sukha, right? This ease and the comfort, this sweetness into the asana or the posture for Sukhasana. So first things first, let's look at some propping that we can use. I've got a whole bunch of things. I've got a number of blankets, a bolster, a couple of blocks, and back behind here I even have a yoga strap. You don't need all of this. You might have your own blankets and different kinds of supports that you can use at home. But this is just what we'll be looking at today. So let's start together. Let's take a cross-legged seat. I'm going to shift over to the side and cross my legs at my shins. Now, I've been doing this a long time, so generally my body is okay in this pose, but after a while it can sure get a little strained, right? So I'm just sitting on the ground without anything underneath me beside my mat. And that feels a little not great. I definitely wouldn't say sweet. There's a hardness underneath my seat. My hips are a little tight. There's a little lift in my knees, and it's not all that easy to get lift in the spine, right? My back is rounding a little, my chest is collapsing. Sometimes when I take this pose in a room of other people, I'll see a lot of strain, shoulders hunched up, knees lifted. So how can we use this stuff to make it a little bit more comfortable? Let's start with one blanket. I'm going to take that blanket, I'm going to open it up, and I'll bring it onto my mat so that it looks like this. And then I'm going to take two more blankets. First one, I'm going to open once and then refold so that's a little bit more narrow in its length, and the folded edge faces forward. I'll do that that exact same thing with the second one, so that my two folded edges are on top of each other and they're both facing forward. This is where I'm going to sit. Now, this blanket under here is pretty important. You'll see why in a moment. Now, once I come up to sit on these two blankets and I cross my legs at my shins, I'm going to have you take hold of your knees and walk your feet away from each other a little. Yeah, so notice that my heels are quite a bit forward of my hips or my sit bones or the buttocks, right? So they're not touching, they're not pulled in. And then we allow the knees to descend so that the knees are just about over the ankles, just about over the feet, and there's a little flexion in the feet. And notice how my feet are now on this blanket. Way more cushy, way sweeter. Now, my knees are in line with my hips and they're not lifted as they were a moment ago. And this is also allowing me to perch up on my sit bones, which then allows me to get lift and length in my spine. So notice if you're able to take a couple of extra supports underneath you, let your hands rest on your legs and notice how that feels, if it feels a little different for you, a little bit more accessible, a little sweeter, so to speak. You might still be gripping a little bit in the hips though. Now, if you feel that tension, that holding, that resistance through the hips, our next option is to take our blocks, right? And when we use the blocks, watch how I'm going to bring these blocks underneath my knees, but I'm bringing the pointy edge right to the crease of the knee. So they're at an angle. I nuzzle right in there. And now the blocks are supporting my knees, and that allows the grip in my hips to soften. I brought the earth up to me. And we can play with the height of those blocks too. If your knees were a little higher, maybe you bring your blocks up a little higher. Voila. And we can be here in our simple cross-legged seat. I'm going to take my blocks down a little bit. And one or two more options or ways of working. Maybe you're still feeling discomfort in your ankles or the outer edges of your feet. Let me show you a little trick here that we can take one more blanket. I'm opening it. I'm going to not so much roll it. I guess I am rolling it. It's a pretty thick roll. And I'm going to take that rolled blanket, that folded up blanket. I'm going to lift my knees and I'm going to bring that blanket right underneath the cross of my shins. So now they're fully supported and nice and comfortable. This definitely feels much sweeter than where I was just a few moments ago with no support at all. So once you've found your way into the posture, into the Sukhasana that suits you, let your hands rest there for a bit. Close your eyes and just feel. As you're feeling, can you soften where you might be gripping? Can you allow yourself to be held and supported by your props? Feel yourself connecting to the ground beneath you. And at the same time, maybe there's a little bit more lift that can come to your spine, less pull or strain in the back. And if your eyes are still closed, go ahead and open your eyes. So I'm hoping that that was helpful for you in looking at this prop support. Before I send you off into the world to explore your Sukhasana on your own, I want to just add a couple of more things that you can work with. So some of you might have found that the two blanket support just wasn't high enough for you. So the next option is to use a bolster in place of your blankets. So that bolster, I'm going to move just a little bit to get it on to my support. That bolster can then come onto your mat, and then we can place one of our blankets on here. So we're even higher, right? We lift our seat higher and higher. Another fun way of playing with the pose, and I'm going to turn so that you can see that, is to use a strap. So as I come to sit on this little setup, my strap will come behind me right around the sacral area. The sacrum is a bone that makes up the back wall of your pelvis. So it's not in your low back, in your lumbar, but a little lower. And once I brought that around my sacrum, I'm going to bring the strap out in front of me and buckle it. Now, as I buckle it, I don't want it to buckle too tight. I want it to be just right. So you have to play with that a little bit. And now the strap is going to hold the edge of my knees and catch the sacrum. Now you have to get just right, just a little pull on that strap. And then we find that the strap almost straddles or holds our knees for us. And we get this nice lift in our spine, hands resting on the legs, and I could stay here. This is probably the ultimate of sweetness, being held fully by the strap. I could probably stay here for a good 10 minutes or more. So these are a couple of other ways to play around with the pose. I invite you to keep exploring, and if you've got some great Sukhasana tips or things that you use in your body, I'd love to hear about them. You can drop a little note in the comments below. Let us know what you think of these different versions and variations and anything that you might be playing with in your own practice. And if you like this video and you'd like to see more, please do subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up. And if there's some postures, other postures you like us to break down and explore more with you, I'd love to hear from you about that too. So have a great day, and I hope your Sukhasana is super sweet.